It's time if everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you. At this time, we will open up the first hearing and privilege of the floor. Just ask that you please abide by Board Policy 1230. State your name and address and adhere to our 5-minute policy, please. All right. At this point, we will close the first hearing and privilege floor. Remind everybody that we will have another one towards the end of the meeting. And at this time, we will start our second round of budget discussion.
All righty. So as we begin this evening, here's what I plan to accomplish tonight. We'll take a look at last week's information and answer any questions that you might have. It will be much quicker than when we presented it last week. We're going to look at K-12 enrollment, and we're going to discuss elementary enrollment and class sizes. I'd ask you just to take a look at this as we get focused for our work this evening. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Giaquinto.
Just a quick recap. The tax cap, which is the maximum allowable amount we can levy with a 50% approval rating or more, is 2.86%. And again, that is the amount we can raise taxes. It does not correlate to the tax rate, which is what we assess community members. It equates to an increase in our tax levy of almost $930,000. Our 11-year average of tax levy increases is 2%. So you can see it's like 0.86 more than the historical. Historically, we've had 8 years under the cap, 2 years at the cap, and I believe 2014 we overrode the cap when it was 0.27 and went out with a 1.76. The district is over the tax cap by $721,199. What that means is the first draft of the budget had a 5.06%, I believe, tax levy increase. To get down to the 2.86, you've got to reduce or raise income by $721,000. The spending increase is 4.34%. That equates to almost $1.7 million of new tax levy. The 11-year average of spending is 2.54. So again, you can see it's about 180 basis points more than our average. State aid increased, quick recap, 2.2% this year. We're fully funded under the current foundation aid formula. The governor removed the hold harmless, which didn't affect us, but did remove the inflationary increase. So we only got 1.5% inflationary impact of that instead of 4%. So that was a big, we would have gotten probably $300,000 more if she had not done that unilaterally. Last year, as you know, was a big state aid increase, 9% or $2 million. So you can see the difference, $1.5 million. What happened to the district state allocation this year? Oh, that's what happened. The governor changed that. So I was reading ahead without looking at it, so hope I answered my own question. Where does our money come from? Pretty much all taxes. Taxes and payment in lieu of taxes represent 54% of the budget. Last year was almost 55%, so about the same. A slight shift where the state aid was 36.7 average, and now it's almost 38% of the budget. Fund balance continues to be in that 6 to 7% range. Other revenue you can see is higher this year. That's because of interest income pretty much going up. Okay. This is our spending increase. We went over last week. Again, the big increases are in transportation, which the 5-year average is 2.4. It almost goes to 15% this year. As I commented on last week, it's because of out-of-district runs through private transportation companies, which are required to get children to the mandated programs. We just didn't have the drivers or vehicles to go to certain places. The other big increase is plant operations, which again is due to the SROs coming into the general fund budget. Otherwise, we're down to about under 4% there. So that's the SROs, bringing 2 of those into the budget this year. They were previously funded by the grants. 5-year average. So you can see this year the 5% projected, 5.08. I misspoke. I said 5.06. Correlates to a 4.34% budget increase. The state aid increase is 2.2%. You can see by taking the previous 5 years average for this year, next year would go to a 9.4 tax levy increase, and the following years right around 7-8%. So that's if we do what we're going to do in the first draft. That's the extrapolation based on the last 5 years. And you can see the state aid at 2.2%. I went back and looked at the last 5 years. It's averaged 2.8. So if we took that 2.8 average going out, that's the tax levy that would be affected. You see the tax levy be absorbing more and more. So it's a sneak preview. That's pretty close last year, unfortunately. Okay. Voter participation. This is a new legislative act, which basically now will allow, in addition to the absentee ballot, it'll be early mail voting this year through a process. So it'll make voting a little easier for people. I also wanted to show you the average voter participation. Last 11 years, about 1,300 people. Typically 76% is the approval rating. We saw in the year we overrode the cap in 2014, we had 73%, and probably 300 more voters came out of 400. These are the propositions that we went over last couple board meetings. The building prop, $12.5 million, which has no increase to the levy because of debt falling off, the new building aid that'll come on, and a little bit of a debt service reserve that we set aside money. So we can do all this work district-wide and not increase taxes. The bus prop, which is for 3 buses, again, will not affect the 24-25 budget because we bond it in the summer of 25. We'll get aid on it, and as that aid's coming on, other buses will fall off. So it's a pretty good process we have here as we borrow money, other debts coming off, so it kind of stays budget neutral going forward. And then the ever aforementioned EV, if we get the federal grant, we have to kind of come up with some local funding, and so it won't affect taxes next year, but that's if we are fortuitous and get the money for 5 buses. Kim, I think you had a question on the how the proposition's worded. Did you want to ask me now, or do you want to wait till we get to that?
Which do you prefer?
Can you answer it now or later?
Why don't we do it when we get to the propositions then? But I did have a question about the state aid, the 2.2%. Is that based on Governor Hochul's proposed budget as it stands now? Mm-hmm. So depending on what the Senate and the Assembly come out with this week, that could potentially change.
If the governor agrees to it, she holds the power. She holds, both legislatures are Democrat. She's Democrat. So she'd have to agree to those. Right now, if they don't agree, her budget holds. So we go with her budget until there's another adopted budget. So they could say higher, they could say lower. We go with her budget during the budget process because she holds the authority to enact the budget.
She's also said that she's holding $100 million. She's setting aside $100 million to help make adjustments for schools that would lose significant funding. That would
That's
that
the hold
affect us at
harmless.
all?
That's the hold harmless, which no district was supposed to, under the foundation aid formula, go backwards in aid. And I think half the school districts went backwards on the hold, because she removed the hold harmless.
Right.
So they're getting less aid than the prior year. So I think that's what she's referring to now, under
That's-
legislative pressure. We did not. We're fully funded.
Okay, that's what I thought. So
Yep.
that would not affect us, that 100 million, if it
Correct.
happens. Okay.
If she restores the CPI to what it's supposed to be, we could get some more aid.
Right, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
No, we're not.
Okay. It's your world now.
All right, so now we're going to talk about what I might call the elephant in the room, which is our enrollment. So I want you just to take a look at this slide. These are facts about enrollment, or facts about the birth rate, I should say, which is clearly impacting our enrollment. And that's both nationwide, where the birth rate has dropped by 19%, 4% in 2020 alone. You know that children who were born in 2019, 2020 will enter school in the fall of 2024 if they make the birthday cutoff. Right now we have 117 students who are actually registered for kindergarten. Now, do I expect that number will come up a bit? Yes, of course I do. But I'm going to temper my expectations about that. The class that entered this fall, which is around 150 students, was during that, probably those children were conceived between July 17 and July of 18. And again, we're seeing that smaller class size now. The birth rate in New York State has declined. You know that many parents, not just in Scotia-Glenville, but throughout the nation, did not return their children to public school after the COVID pandemic. Again, along with birth rates, declining enrollment nationwide. We're not quite sure where some of those COVID children went, but that has certainly been a trend. And as I've mentioned to you before, in our school district, we currently have somewhere between 95 and 100 students who are homeschooled annually. Any questions about any of that?
Do we expect a jump in the next couple of years after 24, 25 based on?
Nationwide, the birth rate was up about 1% in 2021-22. So I want to talk about how we figure out where people end up, if you will, in our schools. So you know school of attendance is determined by someone's address. However, parents and guardians can request a school other than homeschool for their child. Sometimes they do that for childcare purposes. Sometimes they do that for convenience purposes. And we are actually quite generous about allowing that to happen. Not as generous as when I got here, but we're pretty generous. I just remind you that all of our schools offer the same programs, the same specials, library, art, music, and physical education. Our students with special needs may end up in a school other than their home school based on the program that they've been recommended for, because not all of our schools have the exact same programs. We wouldn't have enough students to maintain that. So they don't offer identical programs in every school. And any K-5 student in need of English as a new language, we have a very small English as a new language population, but those students are all at Sacandaga, and that's to maximize the efficiency of our ENL teacher by having them in one spot. We do not have class size caps, I just want to remind you, but we have guidelines. And typically the elementary principals and I talk about plus or minus 2 to the guideline. But I would also tell you that there are no classes at the guideline this school year in any grade. Now, typically what might happen is when let's say, we have 3 kindergarten classes at Sacandaga, and each of them already has 22 students in it, and then we get a new kindergartner. Although the principals are very kind and generous about keeping their students in their school, sometimes I will move that new student to another school that's less enrolled so that we can balance class size. But by and large, I try not to move kids just to balance class size. That takes you out of your neighborhood, out of your buddies, out of your familiar territory. So I have tried in the time I've been here to not do that. But again, I would just say we have no classes running at the guideline this year. This is hard to read, but I just want to talk to you a little bit about it. If you're wondering why did I pick 2005, 2006, that's because that's when I arrived here, in 2005, 2006. And our K-12 enrollment, this is our beds data from our New York State school report card, was 2917. And then if you go to where we are right now, we're at 2137. That's a drop of 780 students, and you can see across the bottom what that impact has been at the different levels. Now, I'd also point out to you, just as a matter of fact, with the exception of Sacandaga, our other 3 elementary schools are nowhere near 241 kids. So while I would not suggest that we close an elementary school, that is not what I'm saying, the reality is we have 241 less children across this time span, and our elementary schools are serving less than 241 children, with the exception of SAC. So again, I'm not suggesting we close the school, but I want you to start thinking about this, because if you look at that, you will see this is a trend. This isn't a quirky thing that has happened to us. And again, we're not the only ones who are seeing declining enrollment. So in 2010, 2011, why did I pick 2010, 2011? Pam would remember this, but we had Dr. Michael Dukowski do an elementary study for us, a very thorough elementary study, because even at that point, we were seeing declines in enrollment, and sought his recommendation for what we might do. And at that point in time, our schools were about 76 to 80% usage, if you will. And technically, we probably could have closed an elementary school. Dr. Dukowski didn't make that suggestion, and again, that was not my suggestion at that point in time. It is not my suggestion tonight. But I would ask you to look at those class sizes. And you will see at Lincoln there was a 5th grade with 29 students in it. But again, if you look at the average class sizes in 2010, 2011, we are right in our class size guidelines. So here we are in 2023, 2024. So here we have the same information. So those are the sections. So for example, Glendale has 2 sections of K, one at 18, one at 19. There's a student with special needs. They spend the bulk of their day in the regular kindergarten classroom. In Glen Warden, they have a section of 17 and a section of 16. They have 5 students who are kindergartners. They are in our program for some of our most challenging children, but 5 of them are in and out of the regular classroom. So that's how you can read that. So you'll also note that in 2010, 2011, our average class size was 21.1 at kindergarten. It's 22 is our guideline. And right now our average class size is 16.4. So again, if you look at both of those columns, we have managed, even losing as many elementary students as we have across time, to keep the same number of sections which has lowered our class size pretty dramatically. So if we had created classes based upon our guidelines this year, you can see the reduction in the number of students. I'm sorry, in the number of sections we would be offering. It's 9 sections. In a 2-deep school, there are 12 sections, 2 of everything. What this shows us pretty clearly is if we were running as efficiently as we could have 9 less sections. How would we do that? We could redraw attendance boundaries. We could close a school. We could do all kinds of interesting things. But the reality is, again, when we think about staffing, which has not declined, we are pretty well staffed and our class sizes are quite reasonable. Now, I know what people want to say to me is, but what about COVID? And what I would have to say about COVID is, it's over. We're doing the best we can. Do I think we could always use more help? Of course I do. I'm a teacher at heart, and I always think we could use more help. And the shiniest materials you can find for me, because I like bright, shiny, new things. But I'm asking you again to focus on what's real right now. And we could be running much more tightly than we are. And that's a credit to the board, to Mr. Giaquinto and his team and their financial planning, and to my team's commitment to a quality education for all students. So in 2020, we had Steve Zontner do a cohort survival study for us. And what I'm looking at is the outgoing years. So 23, 24, and at the time Mr. Zontner did the study, he didn't have the birth rate data because of COVID. So the county wasn't able to provide that data for us. So he did a good job with the projections. So his projections are in the parents. Where we actually are is the straight numbers to the left. So we have 939 youngsters in kindergarten, and you can see that continues to decline, and then, based on the cohort methodology, we take a little bump in 27, 28. And as I go on to tell you here, that method is usually accurate within plus or minus 2%. However, I would also ask you to be mindful of the fact that although we see a little bump at elementary, overall our enrollment continues to decline. So considerations as the budget's developed for 24-25. Except in areas requiring specific certifications, for example, technology, we should not need to hire teaching staff. Drew, when was the last time we actually laid anybody off, had to lay anybody off? Either way. Okay, so again, we haven't gutted staff, we haven't gutted services, we haven't gutted programs, but we have to start thinking about efficiencies. How do we do things more efficiently? If you folks are, as you tell me often, interested in more mental health supports, we are going to have to make some adjustments to special education programming based on student needs. There should be a give to get strategy. It's not layering more on. It's taking what we have and figuring out how to use it differently. And you heard a bit about that last week when folks spoke a bit about moving some students with special needs. Again, we need to do things in a way that is both efficient and positive for kids. We have to start talking about declining enrollment, because declining in elementary and across the district, but the more we have a decline at elementary, you know it's only a matter of time before that becomes an issue at middle school and an issue at the high school. So eventually, that does impact secondary programming. And finally, I would say to you, and you know I take my direction from you, so ultimately you will decide. I do not think we have any justification for going out over 2.86. What we need to do is right-size our ship, get people where they need to be, perhaps move some children to make that happen, but we should be able to work within the blueprint that we have. Would you add anything to that? We will take any other questions you might have at this point.
Susan, when was the last time that you did the lines for the schools? Like, how long ago was that?
It was at a point in time when Glendale's enrollment was down and Lincoln's enrollment was down. So we had shifted the line over around Sunnyside and then moved it down the hill towards Sacandaga. And that was maybe 2010, somewhere in there. I think it was around 2010. So when you see me next week, I will be talking to you about how I think we close the gap and how we might realign our resources district-wide, but not necessarily to add staff. Okay? And if you come up with questions for me between now and then, or for Drew, we're happy to answer those questions.
I have one.
Sure.
On page 11, when we talk about 95 to 100 students homeschooled annually, that's been a big shift since COVID, right?
Well, and before COVID, but we were running closer to 70 or 80.
That's what I'm saying, right? And is that across from K through 12, or is it predominantly at one section or another?
I would say it's across K-12. I would say elementary first, middle school second, and high school third, because what folks don't initially understand is if you choose to homeschool, you can't get a Scotia-Glenville diploma, because in order to get a diploma, you have to meet the New York State requirements, diploma requirements. And so while I don't want to say it's easy to homeschool, while there is more flexibility for elementary and middle school students, the minute you need to start earning those units for graduation, we do sometimes have students return to us so that they can get a regular diploma.
So do we know what grade level they're at right now?
Oh, yes. I know where all of them are because of the homeschool paperwork that's, so parents indicate that they're going to homeschool.
Okay.
They send me what's called an IHIP, which is an individual home instruction plan. They send me quarterly reports, and I read them all. And if your report falls short, I send you a letter saying, where's this or that, based on the New York State standards, because the agreement is you will teach the content that New York requires.
And they know at the end of it, if they go all the way to 12th grade, they won't get a diploma from
We
here.
make sure we are very clear with that, especially when folks start pulling kids out of high school. But I probably have the smallest number of high school students being homeschooled.
Okay.
Good question.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to our reports and updates. Let's see. Mrs. Furnish, why don't you start us off tonight with legislative and PTA?
Okay, sure. With respect to legislative, I talked a little bit about it when we were talking about the budget.
Supposedly, the Assembly and the Senate is going to be sending their proposed drafts out for the budget this week, and both houses have made it very clear that they plan to counter Governor Hochul's budget issues. As Drew said, obviously there's going to be negotiations. Supposed to have the budget by April 1. Part of me is hopeful that the fact that Easter is also at that time might actually make them on time with the budget, but that also can make them take even longer if they want to take their breaks. So we'll see what happens with that. And although it's not necessarily legislative, I still think it's politically important. I gave all of you a decision that has come out, and I think it's pertinent to us. It's a second appellate division decision, People versus Croce. It came out at the end of November last year. And I thought it was important for us because it has to do with the bus cameras. And the second Department Appellate Division determined that the camera footage alone is not sufficient for cases with respect to people passing buses, speeding, etc. There's going to be also need to be witness testimony. While we're in the third department and not in the second department, we have local municipalities that are still following it, like Colony has recently followed the decision. I expect other entities as well. So I just wanted to bring it, Barb Major and Susan May have already known about it, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody was had noticed that we're gonna actually need witness testimony too. So that's it with legislation. With respect to PTA Council, tomorrow night is the Founders Day dinner, and I'm very excited to honor all of those amazing folks, volunteers in the community, and our staff and teachers who are being honored tomorrow night. I think it's going to be a great event, and I look forward to seeing everybody there.
Great, thank you. CAPSPA, I've had two meetings with New York State School Board Association. We're trying to plan one for the end of March to incorporate BOCES, as well as a couple of board presidents, to see if we can integrate CAPSPA with New York State as well as BOCES. So we're taking some steps finally, so hopefully maybe by the end of the year we'll have an update more, but hopefully sooner. But yeah, so that's a good one there. Audit committee, I know we have one scheduled coming up soon.
Yes, we'll do the risk assessment, transportation audit, and the inventory audit in the spring.
Beautiful, thank you. Policy. Yeah, Kim.
Well, we have today to approve the workplace violence prevention policy that we need to add to our policies. Being real honest with you, we're not making a whole lot of progress. The disalignment of the required the numbers on the required policy and the fact that they don't line up with our numbers and they don't line up with the BOCES numbers that we got in the BOCES information is making it quite difficult to figure out what policies go with what.
All right, thank you. Budget, we already talked about. Board of Education goals, which is policy. I had 2 meetings before I was out with Supervisor Ketzley, and we're creating an agenda to incorporate the new incoming temporary supervisor. So that's a positive step. Public and private are extremely different entities to get everybody together. So, and then Superintendent Schwartz, your goal, you're going to be doing something tonight, aren't you?
You have both charges for the strategic work group, which Rick will head up, and then for the superintendent's council.
Beautiful.
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, I can get a motion for resolution item number 6 to adopt the proposition to be presented to the voters at the annual district meeting on May 21st, 2024.
A motion to adopt the proposition to be presented to the voters at the annual district meeting on May 21st, 2024.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Kim, you have a question?
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
So the proposition is written only discusses generally what needs to be done and advising the max amount being 12 million. You had that great presentation a few weeks ago where you got into specifics as to what each school and property needs. So I guess my question is, since it's not as specific in the proposition, if there's changes as to what is being done based on the presentation provided? Is that something you have to come back to us with? Or is it just that we have 12.5 million and we're gonna deal with it for the building work as we see fit?
That's a good question. So the proposition is worded that way to allow flexibility if we do, say, it gives you a bonding limit. And if we're able to save money with the bids and we can do additional work at a school, you don't want to be so specific that it says you can only touch a brick. You want to be able to touch, if you want to do work in the auditorium. So we word it this way so that we have flexibility to work within the framework of the which you saw in that presentation. We make sure that we handle all the things that are identified in those presentations, without a doubt. And if we free up money, then we put it to work so we can get aid on it under that bond limit. But if you word it so tightly, then the state says that's all you're doing.
Right.
So when you save money, you can't spend it on more work in the district.
Okay. But as you sit here today, we're definitely doing everything that was in that presentation, and if we have money left over, then you can utilize it for other building purposes. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you both. Any other questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? So moved. And a motion for resolution number 7, please.
I'll move that we approve the proposed action as a type 2 action for the purposes of the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act for building and site improvements for said school district.
Thank you. And second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Dave. Questions on this one?
Yes, I do. In the resolution as written, it says, it discusses the scope of work and the project for the work. Is that the previous work that we were talking about for the previous prop? Is that what the scope of work is and what the project is, or what exactly is it?
It's for the current proposition of 12.5. So we're required to, I think it was like 20 years ago, the state made the school district the lead agency. So we have to do a resolution stating if there's any environmental impact. And it says if it's a 2 or a 3 or whatever one. There is no environmental impact. We're not disturbing wetlands or any of the ground. So this is boilerplate language the state requires for us to proceed. It's called the SECRA. You're an attorney, you're smarter than me.
I don't know about that.
But that's what this is. The school district's now saying there's no environmental impact to do the 12.5. So it's one of the steps that we do. Bonding limit, the SECRA, that we do in any capital project.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? So moved. I got a motion for item number 8, please. Legal notice of the annual district election.
I'll move that the Board of Education approves the legal notice of the annual district election to be held on Tuesday, May 21st, 2024, as submitted.
Thank you. Second.
I'll second it.
Anderson, thank you both. Any questions, discussion on this? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstain? So moved. I get a motion for the board to approve policy 9052, workplace violence prevention policy.
I'll move to approve policy number 9052, the workplace violence prevention policy as submitted.
Thank you. Second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion on this one?
I have a question. I'm actually elbows deep into this policy and the program for the policy for my agency as well. So I just was curious. Policy I totally approve. I just was curious what who and is doing the program to make sure the policy is effectuated. Who's working on that?
Drew, would you like to take that?
Who's working on it? Our HR, Joe Bush is working on it. I'm working on it. Rick Arquette's working on it. Susan's working on it. We're going to make sure that we involve the proper people, the building level people, the union will be involved in it. So we're going to make sure we go through all the boxes on this thing.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things that the policy committee has been trying to do is get rid of all the pronouns that are in the policies. And there are about 5 or 6 pronouns, the theirs and the theys in this policy. My suggestion is that we go ahead and adopt the policy the way it is, because it's perfectly fine and legal and that type of stuff. And then when we get to the 9,000s and corrections of getting rid of all the pronouns, that we'll do that to this one at that point.
Any other questions, comments? All right, if not, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Abstain? So moved. We can get a motion for items number 10 and 11, please.
I'll motion to adopt the charge for Superintendent's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, and number 11, adopt the charge for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Planning Work Group.
Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any questions, discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Or abstain? So moved. Motion for communications.
I'll move communications A through J, staffing 1 through 12, and the placement of students with disabilities.
I'll second.
Thank you both. Questions, discussions on any of those?
I had a question. What is the honors writing sample supervision?
Marissa, could you help me out with that?
So as part of our honors application for humanities, students had to stay after to complete a traditional writing sample for us. So we needed teachers to cover those classrooms while the students completed that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Opposed? So moved. Under routine business, need the minutes for the regular meeting for February 12th, please. Moved and second.
Did you have somebody to move? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
I moved to accept the meeting minutes for February 12th, 2024.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you both. Any questions on those minutes? No? All right, so moved. Questions on treasurer's report? January?
I am abstaining. You didn't actually
Okay.
vote on that one because I was not here for that meeting.
All right, Em abstains. She was absent. All right, treasurer's report, January 24. Questions? Internal claims audit report. Questions on payroll A42? A45? Or A47? Check warrants A41? H10? A44? Right, so approved. Other business?
I just want to say I went to 2 amazing events last week. The science fair was just stunning. It was so amazing to see all those kids together, how excited they were. They wanted to talk about their projects. So congrats, and I know you had a team that worked with you. Everybody did an amazing job. It was really great. And then Friday, I was lucky enough to be able to go see the Unified Bowling team. I hadn't really had experience with that before, but seeing their camaraderie and how excited just they were to be there and how happy they were, and they were very serious about what they were doing. It was really amazing to see them, and then they got 3rd place, which is so cool. So it was definitely a good week for the Tartans, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Any other business? All right, if not, we will open up the second hearing and privilege of the floor. So at this time, if anyone would like to address the board, just state your name, your address, adhere to our 5-minute policy. Refrain from using anyone's name in particular. All right, I will close the second hearing and privilege of the floor. Thank everybody, and I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Tim, second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? So moved. Thank you all. We will see you next week.